We're going to start here. There's a new alliance in town.
Yes.
Not the Magicians Alliance.
It's an
different. Actual streets alliance.
Yeah.
And the mission is to make Traverse City streets safer. So Beth, can you tell us a little more about this?
Sure. This is a story we had in the ticker this week, the Grand Traverse Safe Streets Alliance. They made a presentation to Traverse City commissioners on Monday. This is a group that has multiple local nonprofits and advocacy groups that you probably have already heard of. So a lot of groups already working in town, like the TART Trails, Cherry Capital Cycling Club, Norte, Groundwork Center, Disability Network. A lot of great groups doing good work in town. But they've come together under this alliance essentially to try to advocate for ways to make our corridor safer for all users. That does include vehicles, but with a particular focus on cyclists, pedestrians, people with disabilities who are using wheelchairs or other mobility devices. In this presentation of the City Commission on Monday, they were talking about what they called quick hit projects, which are a list of projects that they thought could be done in Traverse City cheaply and effectively to make streets safer, not talking about, a huge redesign of a corridor or changing a signal, but just sometimes it's as simple as pavement markings or paint or adding a little bike lane in a certain section. So they talked about, as an example, like Franklin Street between 8th Street and the Boardman Lake Trail by Juniors there. Let people know that street. It's used all the time by cyclists because that's how you get on the Boardman Lake Loop if you're from downtown or 8th Street. But it doesn't have any designated place for bikes to go. There's a lot of traffic because the Juniors there. They have parking across. There's kind of cars going back and forth. There's side tracks there. So that was an example where they were like, we'll just put up some delineators, have some paint down, and just try having one lane on the side for the summer for cyclists just to give them a little protection. Sometimes these things are just visual cues to a driver to remind them, oh, yeah, there are people who are walking and biking here. Sometimes it's a physical barrier. So if someone's distracted driving, they could hit something and it wouldn't be the cyclist or pedestrian themselves, but something that gives them an alert, gets them back on the road. So they were just kind of outlining some of those ideas.
Yeah. How has the public, how are they responding to this? I like to go to the Ticker's Facebook page sometimes just to see how people are handling
humanity.
Yes.
for better or worse sometimes.
So what do the people say?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's interesting. I think there's maybe the conversation that happened in the thread illustrates potentially the need for this group or some of the conversations that this group could facilitate, because I think there's sometimes an adversarial relationship between cars and cyclists in many communities, not just Traverse City, but here. But if you're drivers, you'll often see drivers complain in the comment section that cyclists don't follow the rules of the road. They blow through stop signs. They're not paying attention. Why do we have to why do they take up the whole road? Why do you have to slow down? You see that. And then, of course, cyclists are saying, we have a right to be on the road. We're in much greater peril than a car is. Right. As someone who's walking, typically the most vulnerable people on the road are going to be cyclists and pedestrians, not people who are in, 2 tons of steel. So I did see that reflected in the comment section. But what I, thought was interesting about this group, when I talked to Richard Robbins, who's a retiree, he moved to Traverse City last year, and he was the one who kind of helped spearhead this. He's an avid cyclist. He said, we're not an anti-auto group. He's like, I'm a driver. We're all drivers. We need to, especially in the winter here, many of us need to use cars to get around. He's like, we want the roads to be safer for everyone, including drivers. The goal is to be more collaborative. We're all using this infrastructure together. So how can we all use it more safely together?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I'm all about safer streets.
Yeah.
You got to have street smarts.
Street smarts, as John Mulaney would say. Yes.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good idea to just find the things that are a little bit easier to work on, to fix, to approach, because I think a lot of people probably they're driving by or they're biking and they're wondering why hasn't this little detail, been taken care of? And so it's pretty cool to see that. I mean,
one of the things I love about journalism is I feel like even I've been doing it for on and off for 20 years, but I feel like I always still learn things, and I love that. And for example, in this story, one of the things I learned is, those bright white pavement markings that show you where you cross as a pedestrian. Seeing eye dogs also cue those to know when it's safe to take their handlers across roads. They often, that's part of the infrastructure they look at to say this is where we're supposed to cross. So when you have those pavement markings fade over time, it's not just dangerous because cars don't see, that's a pedestrian crossing and pedestrians aren't sure where they're supposed to go. But the seeing eye dogs also are losing that cue of where they're supposed to cross. So it's just things like that are interesting. The infrastructure makes a difference to a lot of different groups. And sometimes when you're not in a group, you don't think about how it affects another one. I thought that was an interesting thing I learned from that story.